Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking about episode 6 of season 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man called The Sinister Six. First of all, let me apologize if this review is a little bit shorter than usual. My throat's been bothering me and I've been sick lately, so I'm not 100% on that. But let's get right into it. Now, our bad guys this time around are the Sinister Six. In the comics, they are traditionally a varying roster of Spider-Man villains. We do get a pretty nice roster going on here. Get so you know I'm pretty happy with this incarnation of the Sinister Six. I kind of prefer guys. I kind of would have liked to have seen maybe Shocker and Mysterio, just because I'm fans of those particular villains. But they haven't been introduced into Ultimate Spider-Man continuity, so I can live with that. And I suppose that that's mostly just because they were two of the members of the Sinister Six, or maybe it was Insidious Six, that they were called on the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, when the Six were formed by the Kingpin to take down Spider-Man. Good stuff. Anyway, so let's get right into it. First of all, let's talk about what we have going on at the very beginning at Liberty Island. Alright, now, first of all, what we see here with the whole training thing that Peter is doing just absolutely boggles my mind with how ridiculous and stupid it is. Because let's stop and think about this. Spider-Man is deliberately having his friends attack him on the Statue of Liberty. He is basically inviting powerful superhumans to brawl on and potentially damage one of America's greatest national icons. This reminds me of like the first issue of the Thunderbolts, where you briefly see the Wrecking Crew attacking the Statue of Liberty, and then in front of a news chopper, they smash part of the base and do some decent damage to it. Now, immediately afterwards, we see reactions from people in both New York and across the whole country of just absolute outrage, which is, of course, exactly what would happen. Here we have Spider-Man thinking it's a good idea to have him and his buddies duking it out on the statue, having Nova frickin' shoot lasers at the Statue of Liberty. And he thinks this is a good idea. This is an instance where J. Jonah Jameson is completely right that Spider-Man is a menace. I mean, honestly, I am amazed that S.H.I.E.L.D. did not swoop in and throw all of these guys in jail. Oh, and speaking of Nova, let's not forget that later on in this episode, he shoots a laser at a newscopter and actually damages it. Let's stop and think about this. Superheroes shooting lasers deliberately at the media. Oh my god. I just don't have words for how incredibly dumb this is. Oh yeah, and speaking of incredibly dumb, S.H.I.E.L.D. still cannot keep supervillains in jail for anything at all. Oh man, I mean, I know the Amazing Friends are supposed to be training to be, the next generation of S.H.I.E.L.D. super agents, but neither generation of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents looks particularly competent this episode. Speaking of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, one thing that I did like is that this episode acknowledges that Curt Connors is aware of Peter Parker's secret identity, which is, of course, an enormous complication when you consider that part of the main goal of the Ultimate Sinister Six is to find out who Spider-Man is and unmask him, to unmask Spider-Man and find out who he is, so that they can easily destroy him. Now, and Doc Ock is completely clueless that the answer is basically just a few feet away from him, in the head of one of his own allies. Now, granted, Curt is able to muster up sufficient will to not spill the beans when the moment comes, which is a testament to him as a character. So, and of course, it does add some nice tension to what's going on there. And of course, the thing at the end where Curt seems to decide he wants to embrace being the Lizard. I mean, this is an enemy of Spider-Man who knows that he is Peter Parker. This is something new. This is something unique, and it's even more haunting because what he says at the very end about how if Peter just wants to keep coming after him, trying to redeem the man within, that he won't stop failing, is how it is very aptly and very darkly put. So this really adds some stuff that's going to be keeping Peter up at night. And whatever flaws this episode might have, I have to say that particular instance towards the end, and basically what they did with the Lizard this episode, was done quite well. Let's see. Oh yeah, one thing I have to give some little nod to is they mentioned the old fastball special. Of course, the fastball special is from the X-Men comics of all things, and generally consists of when Colossus picks up Wolverine and throws him at an enemy. I haven't really seen, besides the appearance by Wolverine, too many nods in the direction of the X-Men in this series. But still, I did appreciate that as a long-time X-Men fan. Now let's see. Spidey's battle with the Sinister Six in the sewers. I gotta say, again, nicely done. We're seeing the Sinister Six, presented as genuinely formidable enemies. But of course, the extremely volatile nature of that group is never too far from the surface. And of course, that is something that Peter is able to exploit. And again, this is all just classic Spider-Man stuff. This is how Peter operates. This is what makes Spider-Man good. So on that front, this episode also succeeds. Now, getting on to how things sort of wrap up at the end of this episode, when we have the Amazing Friends and the Sinister Six duking it out on Liberty Island. Okay, one thing I do have to say briefly is we actually see a tourist couple wandering around briefly. Tourists are no longer allowed to set foot on Liberty Island. They banned that years ago, just because of terrorism fears. But, that's no fun if they have that here in the cartoon, so I'm not going to begrudge it that. I also like that White Tiger immediately fell into wanting to fight Kraven. Not really surprised that Ava would still like to kick good old Kraven in the teeth one more time after everything that they've been through, after she's been through thanks to him. So again, a nice touch there. And the little nod to Marvel versus Capcom when the two groups get ready to start throwing down. Also some really good stuff there. Now, generally, I don't think this fight was quite as good as what we saw with simply between Spider-Man in the sewers and the Sinister Six, just because, well, here it's a much more even fight. When it's Spidey having to deal with 6-on-1, well, that's much bigger stakes, much more interesting stakes. And the idea that, okay, we're evenly matched with fighting the villains this way, everybody switch opponents. I mean, oh, come on, that's just such a cliche. I mean, there's really, there's ultimately nothing wrong with it, but that is a cliche, and honestly, it's one I'm a little bit tired of seeing. But still, it was a big group of superhumans brawling with another group of superhumans, and it's hard to go wrong with something like that. So I suppose I can let the episode slide a little bit on that one, even if I am not entirely thrilled by it. But to kind of bring this towards an end, and again, I do apologize for this review being short. My throat's just not up for it. What I really appreciate is just how surprisingly somber this episode ended, on such a surprisingly somber note. As I said, we've talked about the Lizard telling Spider-Man, if you keep trying to save Curt Connors, you won't stop failing. Nick Fury gives Peter some very good but very hard advice that, you have to be happy with the victories that you can get. And just the general, like I said, just the generally somber nature of the way this episode wrapped up. The good guys did not totally save the day. There is a good man out there who has possibly been lost to this dark, bestial side of his personality. And this person knows who Peter is. He knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And that could potentially be really bad on a lot of levels in the future. And like I said, I just generally appreciate the fact that this episode does not shy away from ending on a dark and somewhat down note. I don't think that's something we've really seen before, and I think it's quite impressive. It's certainly a step up for the writing in terms of maturity on the show, which has at times been horribly, horribly lacking in maturity. Now, again, I understand that this show is basically aimed at very young kids, and that's why the show is so often zany and wacky, and at the end of the day, there's nothing really all that wrong with that. But the reason that I like this so much is this is showing that even though it can be aimed at a young audience, this is a show that's not really going to talk down to them. Even young kids can handle serious and not always happy ideas, so long as you present it to them appropriately. And of course, for me and the other older fans, we can deal with a somewhat down or somber ending, simply because we're adults and we can handle that level of storytelling. So anyway, while not without some major league idiocy at certain parts, this is still a pretty solid episode. And as I said, I do appreciate the step in maturity that the writers were willing to take a little bit of a risk there at the end. With that said, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.